left off with Chapter 6, The Monster. So that's where I'll continue reading today. The cows were munching hay in their stalls when the big barn door slid open and a mechanical monster stomped in from the rain. The creature marched down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing through the cavernous space until she found an empty corner. And there she stood in the shadows as a storm began to rage outside. Everybody listened as the rain poured and the wind howled and the thunder cracked. By midnight, the storm had blown over, and there was only a gentle sprinkling on the roof. But the herd couldn't rest with that monster lurking in the corner. Cows began quietly mooing to each other. "What is the monster doing? She hasn't moved in hours. I bet she's waiting to eat us in our sleep." The cows gasped at this horrible thought, and then an old cow named Annabelle tried to calm down the herd. "Relax, everyone," she said. "There were monsters like this at my last farm, and they never ate any cows. Come to think of it, they never ate anything at all." "If this monster has never eaten anything at all, she must be awfully hungry by now," said a cow named Tess. "I saw the farmer driving the monster around in his truck," said a calf named Lily. "I don't think he would have done that if she were dangerous." Nobody knew quite what to think of the strange creature in their midst. "I think the monster is harmless. I think the monster is unnatural. I think the monster is moving." The herd fell silent as the monster marched out from the shadows and into the middle of the barn. And then the monster did the impossible. She did the unthinkable. She spoke to the cows in the language of the animals. "I am not a monster. I am a robot. My name is Roz." Chapter 7, The Robot's Story. None of the cows could believe that this monster, this robot, this machine had just spoken to them in the animal language. They stared at her, nervously shifting in their stalls, wondering what she would do next. What Roz did next was simple. She told the truth. She stood in the middle of the barn and shared her story with the herd. I spent my first year of life on a remote, wild island," Roz began. "I did not know how I got there. I only knew that I wanted to survive. So I studied the island animals to see how they survived, and a surprising thing happened. Their sounds and movements started making sense to me. I was learning the language of the animals. Even when I could speak to them, the animals wanted nothing to do with me. But that changed when I discovered an orphaned gosling. The poor little thing would have died on his own, so I cared for him and adopted him as my son. His name is Bright Bill." A murmur spread through the herd. When the animals saw me caring for Bright Bill, they finally accepted me. I was no longer alone. I had friends and a family and a home. Life was good. Until the Rico robots arrived. They came in their sleek white airship to take me away, and when I resisted, they became violent. The animals defended me. They fought bravely and destroyed the Ricos, but I was badly damaged in the fighting. I needed repairs, and I could not get them on the island, so the animals loaded my broken body into the airship, and it took me far away from my home. Lily the calf poked her head through the railing and said, "What about Bright Bill?" "My son is smart and tough, and he has a good flock," said Roz. "I think he will be okay without me." "Where were you taken?" said Tess. "I was taken back to the factory where I was made. The factory is run by a crew of robot workers called the Makers. When I arrived, they put me in a room filled with other broken robots. Some robots were completely ruined." There's a picture. "And the Makers immediately sent them away. But those of us with working computer brains were given a test." "What kind of test?" said Lily. The makers simply asked us questions. They asked us how we had become damaged. They asked us how we would respond to different emergencies. They asked us to identify certain sounds and smells and objects. Robots who answered every question correctly were repaired. All others were destroyed. In the wilderness, in the wilderness, I camouflaged my body to survive in the robot. In the robot factory, I camouflaged my personality to survive. I pretended to be a perfectly normal robot. I did not say I had adopted a goose, or that I could speak with animals, or that I had resisted the Ricos. I said what I had to say to pass the test, and it worked. Good for you, Roz, shouted Tess, and the other cows smiled. The makers shut me off, and when I awoke, my body was fixed and I was on this farm. Now, like all of you, I belong to Mr. Sharif. The cows stopped smiling. Everyone was quiet. Then old Annabelle spoke up. I was taken from my friends and family too, she said. They're back on the farm where I was born. I still think about them every day. It is difficult to be apart from our loved ones, said the robot. You know, Roz, things could be worse, said Tess. At least on this farm, you're still surrounded by nature. Yes, things could be worse. The robot's eyes brightened a little. But I am not safe here. If any human ever learns who I really am, they will have me destroyed, and that is why, when the time is right, I will try to escape. That's the end of chapter 7. Definitely a hint about the title. Some foreshadowing, perhaps, there. Chapter 8, The Computer. Inside the barn, the lights were low, the sounds were hushed, and the night slowly wore on. A few cows were chewing hay, but most were resting peacefully. Our robot had returned to her corner. The soft glow of the computer screen lit up her face as she studied farming. She learned about the herd, about the pasture and the fields, about the native plants and wildlife, about the seasons and the climate and the weather, about the machines and the buildings and the fences and the tools and all the dairy equipment. Every detail was perfectly remembered in the robot's computer brain. And in a single night, Roz became a farmer. Chapter 9, The First Day. At dawn, the cows began to stir. One by one, they walked out the side door, across the muddy barnyard, and into the parlor for a quick milking before heading down to the pasture. They followed the same routine every morning like clockwork. However, on this morning, the cows were joined by a robot. With her computer brain full of farming knowledge, Roz was ready for her first day on the job. She stomped through the tall, wet grass, and her head slowly turned as she scanned the scenery. The sun was rising, the fog was lifting, the cows were grazing, and then the whole world seemed to flip upside down. Oh, man, what's going to happen? Before Roz knew what was happening, she was on her head looking up at the sky. A strong stench filled the air. Our robot had slipped on cow dung. The herd erupted into laughter. Tess called out, "Welcome to Hilltop Farm, Roz," which brought out another round of snorts and moos. "You'll have to get used to cow patties and to laughter," said old Annabelle, strolling over. "Not much happens around here, so we're always eager to laugh." "I understand," said Roz. "I like laughing too." And she forced out an awkward ha, ha, ha. Then the robot stood up, wiped her feet, and continued exploring the farm. But she was more careful to watch where she stepped. The fields and buildings and fences were all in need of Roz's attention. But her most urgent task was to fix the broken farm machines. The herding machine was designed to roll through the pasture and look after the cows while they grazed. But it had gotten stuck in the mud and was becoming a popular hangout for birds. The field machine was gigantic, like a house on wheels. It was designed to roam the fields, planting and fertilizing and harvesting the feed crops. But it had ground to a halt weeks ago and was now just collecting dust in a far corner of the property. The drone was a small flying machine with a special camera attached to its underside. It was designed to fly above the farm and keep an eye on the whole place, but it came crashing down when a mob of crows attacked it in flight. Other broken machines were hidden within clumps of weeds. Still more were waiting for repairs in the shed. The peaceful morning was suddenly jolted by the sound of power tools as Roz began fixing the machines. Thanks to her robotic strength and smarts, she made excellent progress. The hours flew by, the machines rumbled back to life, and the farm began buzzing with activity. At sunset, Rambler came bouncing down the driveway with the Sharifs in the front, and Oscar in the back. "How's it going, Roz?" Or no, sorry, that's not Mr. Sharif. I thought it was the kids. "How's it going, Roz?" said Mr. Sharif, leaning out his window. The children giggled and waved from their seats. The dogs sniffed in the breeze. "It is going well," said Roz in a robotic voice. Many of the machines are working again." "I see that." Mr. Sharif gazed up at the drone circling high overhead. We thought you'd come out and check on you, but it looks like you're doing fine, so we'll stay out of your way. Keep up the good work, Roz." As the truck started rolling up the driveway, Oscar looked back at Roz and barked. "You smell like cow patties." He was right. The robot was filthy, and she finished her first day as a farmer by scrubbing herself with soap and water. That's where we'll stop for today.